Morning, and thank you for joining. So today we're going to be covering AutoCAD tips and tricks. This is the first one of 2024. Actually, this is the only one of 2024, so I could have probably taken the number one off. My name's Ryan Wunderlich. So those of you that don't know who I am, my name's Ryan Wunderlich. I've got 38 years of experience in AutoCAD across multiple industry segments. I'm currently one of the support team managers here over the AEC team. I've taught AutoCAD as a certified instructor. I've got more than 15 years of CAD management experience, 8 years cruise ship building, 5 years of civil survey landscape architecture before that. I've worked in mechanical, electromechanical, printed circuit board and schematics, architectural, acoustic, as well as doing equipment layouts in industrial spaces, as I like to tell people. And what I usually say is I've done everything but aerospace and automotive because I've never had a chance. And I have a bachelor's in business management and a master's in organizational management. So today's webinar, we're going to be talking about block libraries, and we're going to talk about setting up a block library that works for you, right? Why do we use blocks? Important things to know, what not to do, and tools to facilitate using them and some of the pitfalls that come with those. So we're going to talk about tool palettes, single file and use of Design Center, the block library in the blocks palette, and custom programming. And we're just going to look at that at a glance. We're not going to get super deep into it, but I will show you that there's ways we can use custom programming to facilitate block placement and things like that. So with that, let's get started. We're going to talk about setting up a block library that works for you. So setting up a block library is a way of making you more efficient. Things to put in a block library are the items that you regularly insert into your drawings, such as details, common items like chairs, tables, doors, title blocks. We're going to be covering a number of methods to assist in getting these into your drawings, right? So the importance of the block library is that you're not copying and pasting from old drawings. You're not having to redraw stuff over and over again. You have one single source of truth. That's what you use. Right? Blocks allow you to quickly add complex geometric entities without redrawing them. That allows you to easily repeat the same look and feel of the drawings quickly and easily. You have less chance of errors. So things not being correctly scaled, you have missing elements of geometry, wrong layer, line type, and color. And the items will always have the same scale, will always look right. Okay, these are really important things these are important things on why we use blocks and why we have a block library. Right, so important things to know. You want to use styles and settings from your common template. You don't want to just grab random stuff, not knowing what settings are in there, things like that. Everything in a block should be scaled and drawn at 1:1 initially. Then you can scale them in your drawing, or if you're doing annotative blocks, then they will scale correctly annotatively. Use only your standard styles. If you're using something from another drawing, be sure to change anything you need: text, dimensions, multi-leaders, layers, etc. If you currently handle both imperial and metric projects, be sure to set and create everything in one specific set of units. Makes it easier for later, and I actually have an example of that. Don't be afraid of having to redraw or reblock something if it's not right. And you can make blocks annotative, but be wary of the results. Don't use annotative text in an annotative block because the annotative text will double annotate scale and will become incorrect. So if you are planning on making annotative blocks and you are planning to put text in those, you will need to create a text style that is non-annotative. So just important things to know. So next thing is, and unless you need something on a specific layer, always draw all the geometry on layer 0, set the line type and the colors of the drawn objects to by layer as well. This will allow the block to inherit any of the properties of the layer it's placed on. This will allow you to reuse the same block and change the layer to alter the look, i.e. you can use a door and you can have it be an existing door versus proposed. You can put it on a new versus a demo layer. All of those things will be inherited when you just simply change the layer the block is on if it's all drawn on layer 0, line type by layer, color by layer. I do have a webinar specifically talking about information on layer 0 and why it's so important. I do have a link right here where I talk about specifically layer 0 and depth points and what's so important about those. If you've not seen that, please go back and take a look at that one. It covers a lot more of that information. Now, if you are cross units, i.e. if you work in both the imperial and the metric, like are your styles like text and dimension styles the same name? If not, consider making them the same names to help not have lots of rework when the blocks is exploded. And I will give you a good example of that. So imperial to metric or vice versa. If they're the same name, they will inherit the same properties. Everything will be normal. If you're just simply inserting a metric block into an imperial scale drawing and you explode it, everything goes haywire because names are different. That's usually the problem. What not to do. So don't ever assume that anything copied from another drawing is clean or safe to use. Don't overcomplicate the block. Purge out everything you can from the block. Simplify where appropriate. If you have a foot-long bolt and you draw threads on it, do you really need the threads on do you need every single thread on the bolt? If you don't, simplify that down so it just is a rectangle. Don't place things on specific layers without a thought process behind it. Okay, so if you're making I'm going to use a door. If you're making a door block and you put it on A-door for architecture, understand that where the block is placed, what layer the block is placed on may be different from the layer that the block is in. So if you place that on if you accidentally place a door block that has geometry drawn on the A-door layer and you place it on layer A-building and you freeze A-building, the block will disappear. This is why I say whenever possible, put everything on layer 0. If you just turn layer 0, or turn the A building off, the block will still stay there, it will still be visible. But just understand there are things like that. If you're working in a vertical product like Civil 3D, AutoCAD architecture, be mindful that the blocks may be larger or smaller due to the units in the template and will have unpurgeable items and data. Generally, what I recommend is making them all in basic AutoCAD, thus preventing that extra drawing stuff or using export to AutoCAD 2018 command to strip all the AEC stuff out when you know it's correctly working. The reason why I say that is that export, it might be, I think you're right, Brian, it might be missing a T. It might be export to AutoCAD. I'll fix that here in just a second. All right, so let's go back and fix that. Right, since you made that observation, export to AutoCAD. There, is that better? So export to AutoCAD 2018 to strip out. The reason why I say this is that if you have a simple door drawing, right, we're going to go back to doors, and you do it in AutoCAD architecture, that drawing might be much larger than the containing geometry because of all of the extra stuff that goes into AutoCAD architecture, or like Civil 3D, you have all the styles. So it's best to export to AutoCAD. You'll see the block size drop significantly from that point, and then you'll have a much smaller, more nimble block that doesn't create a lot of bloat in your drawings. So this is why I point this out. I have a lot of people who create everything in Civil 3D and can't understand why their drawings get so large, because every block you're inserting is a megabyte minimum because it's built off a template that has all the styles, things like that. So with all that said, now we're going to talk about the different methods that we can do this. So tool palette. So you can place all the blocks that you've created into tool palettes. You can make a single drawing and create a tool palette from that. I do have a webinar that discusses all about tool palettes in depth. So we definitely want to keep that in mind. There are some things to know about tool palettes. I didn't want to get too deep into that here, but I did want to make sure that you guys knew that one. And I'm going to put that here. That's my all about tool palettes. Couple of things to know is you have to update the palettes manually. Any new blocks have to be added manually, and it is not an easy process to share this to multiple users. Okay, so there are some pitfalls with it. It's not easy to share. Everything is a manual process to update from there, but tool palettes work nicely. And now I'm going to go through demonstration and going to give you some basics on that. So we'll go back to AutoCAD. So if I have my tool palettes up here, I can go ahead and create a brand new tool palette, right? And we're going to call this my webinar blocks. Okay. And in my webinar blocks here, I can now come into where I have some block data, and I can now bring, basically I have a whole directory of blocks here. I can just bring these all in, things like that. Very easy from here. Now when I click this, it'll automatically insert, ask me for the insertion point, and now I have this piece of information. Now, again, we can share this information out. We can do other things with this, and then, you know, going back quickly to my all about blocks or all about tool palettes, we can go into the properties and we can change certain things. Like we can have it automatically scale to a specific scale. We can pick a different scale like dim scale or plot scale. We can automatically insert a rotation. If I want this information to come in on a specific color, layer, line type, plot style, line weight, or transparency, I can set it in the tool palette. And then it doesn't matter where I put this information, that's where, it doesn't matter what layer I'm on. Like I'm on layer 0 right now, this block is inserted on layer 0. If I told it to use a different layer, like centerline or depth points or dim here, right? So when I reinsert this block, you're going to see that this block is now on the dim layer. Okay, again, all of this is covered in that webinar. I just wanted you to know that that webinar does exist. About if you want to learn more about tool palettes, I've just given you the broad brush. So this is one of the big things that we like. Let's see, do you know why sometimes I have blocks in my drawing and when I open the drawing later, it will say the drawing needs recover. I recovered and it solved some issues and deleted all my blocks from the drawing. Yes, Wendy. Generally, that means that the block definition that you brought in has a corruption of some kind, or your drawing that you're bringing it into might have some problems. I do have there's some things here, hang on. Let me give you this. If any of you have not seen this one, putting it into our chat, here's the how to clean drawings that come from outside your organization. I highly recommend that if you're not doing this, make sure that you start exercising that particular process. That is going to help those things from going. Yes, Brian, have a toolbar for switching between different tool palettes. I've created those a number of times where we can actually go to a different directory, pick a different set of tool palettes that will populate here, so we won't have to worry about things like tool palette groups, etc. And I think I covered that in my all about tool palettes. If I didn't, we can talk about that during the Q&A if you really want to go down that path. So that's tool palettes at a glance. Right? Then we go into Design Center, right? You can place the blocks created into a single DWG file. You can use Design Center to access that DWG and insert blocks from there. Any new blocks added to that file will always show up in Design Center. You can simply drag and drop, or you can right mouse click and select Insert. The cool thing about this is that you can also redefine a block that has the same name in the drawing. So let's say somebody's updated a block in that drawing. You have the old one in your drawing. You can right mouse click and just say redefine only, and it will update the geometry to match of all of your block instances. So there's other advantages to Design Center too. So for example, you can bring in layers, line types, and some other data. So how we do this, so we type in DC or Design Center to open the palette. You can also go to the ribbon, View tab, expand out the palette section here and select Design Center. The cool thing too here is that you can actually set a home default. So if you open up Design Center and in the folder tab, navigate to the drawing or folder you want as the default location to open as home, you simply right mouse click and say set to home. And every time that you open up Design Center, that's the first place it's going to take you, is to your home. So you can always go right to your drawings that you use. So now let's talk about Design Center. And I actually quite like Design Center for a number of reasons. So I'm going to go ahead and close my tool palette. So let's go to Design Center. When a block is created, there's an area to add a description. Can the description be edited once the block is created, or does the block need to be exploded and recreated? You should be able to change the description in the block definition itself. We might touch on that, Robert, when I get a chance. So you'll see here, right? I'm going to go to my working data. I'm going to go to my webinars because I have some things here. I have a palette drawing. So here is a casework drawing. When I open up this casework drawing right here, there's a couple of things I have. So you're going to see I have blocks. Let me make this a little bigger. So these are all the things that are in this drawing that I can bring into the drawing that I'm currently in. So here's all my blocks. I'm going to generate some icons here. All right, any place I can find this presentation to make notes after? Yes, if you email Lori after the presentation is over, she will send you the slides if you want. And then once the video is up and posted, she can send you that as well, Wenderlin. So you'll see I have ADA Sync. All I need to do is click on it, right? So I can click and drag. Kind of a heavy drawing, so let's go click and drag. Boom. Now I have my accessible sync detail right here. I can click and drag, bring in my cabinet base detail. I could right mouse click and say insert block from here. It's going to bring up my insert dialog box. I can specify on the screen, do the same thing here. This is great in the fact that not only in here, you also have dimension styles. So if these styles don't already exist in the drawing, I can bring them in. I can do the same thing with layers. If I have layout tabs that have specific information, i.e. if your template is already pre-populated with paper sizes and layout tabs, I can bring those in easily just by right mouse clicking and saying, right? That should create a, since I already have a layout 2 and this says layout 2, it's not going to bring it in because again, it's a duplicate definition. Line types if I want those, multi-leaders, section views, table styles, etc. So this is a cool way of doing things, and it's actually fairly straightforward. If I go in and make a change to this casework drawing, and I either add a new block or I modify one of these, then I would come in here and I could say redefine only, and it would allow me to redefine the definition that's in my drawing without having to reinsert it. So that's the cool part about Design Center. It's actually one of the least commonly used tools, and it actually has a lot of power to it. If I have my Design Center open when I close CAD, when I start CAD again, it starts so slow. Any ideas why? All right, so some of that it might be dependent, Tim, on where your Design Center is pointing to for home, and if you've got it set to try to go to a location that doesn't exist, or let's go back to AutoCAD, because you have folders, you have open drawings, and you have history. So if your history starts getting very large in between, you may need to come in here and clear some of this stuff out. Like, you know, you can delete some of the stuff from history, especially if these drawings have moved or are no longer available because it just has to resolve all of this. Or if you're pointing to a network location and it can't find that network location, or if you've set home, like if I set this as home, this is where I'm always going to start, set to home. So if I start here always, that could be one of it. That's something we could definitely look at. If you've got support with us, we can help that. But that's typically the reason why those things are going. The other thing too is if you're in AutoCAD and you have multiple drawings open, it has to open up all of the drawings in here. The more drawings you have open, the harder this is to go. So that could be part of it as well. All right, let's see. Now we're going to talk about the block library palette. So here you can place blocks created into a single file or again a directory. Then you set up the block palette to see that folder or file as a block library. You can easily set up multiple folders or drawings to pull from. Any new blocks added to that file, if you're pointing to a single DWG or folder, will automatically show up next time you access this block library. Right? And this is another one. Now with the block library, right? So I have a block library right here. You'll see I'm pointing to that same casework drawing that I was using here in Design Center, and you'll see I have all the same data here. And if we start looking at options, we have additional options here that we can pull from. So for example, we can set whether or not we want to explode it, repeat placement, auto placement. We can change rotation, scale, and insertion point here. And again, all I need to do is click on this. So basically what you do is you click here, you say, where do you want to go? So I want motors, well, and I've already set this. So this is pointing to a specific drawing. This is pointing to a directory of motors and reducers. So these are all of those motors and reducers that I already have here. And you'll see this list is quite extensive. All I need to do is click on it, drag it, now it's in. Couple of things with the block palette. If you open up the block palette and your drawing crashes or your AutoCAD crashes, okay, that usually means somewhere in your recent or in your favorites, you may have a problem with one of those block definitions having an issue, which is now creating the problem. To clear out your recents, type in block MRU, which stands for block most recently used. Set that to 0. It'll empty this out and erase all of this bad data, and then set it back to whatever value you want. Then try to reopen the block palette and see if that fixes the problem. If it's in your favorites, then we're going to have to go digging around to find where your favorite blocks are being stored. Generally, these are stored on your profile under your users, app data. It's app data, roaming folder, Autodesk, AutoCAD, whatever flavor you're using. It's buried in there where we may have to delete those favorite blocks, and then you'll just have to put them back in. But again, block libraries, great place to go. Because again, I can point to, right? So if I want to add another one, like here's my mountings, I'm gonna open mountings. And now here's all my mountings. So I can bring in a mounting very quick, right? Pop that right here. And now I just need to align these and I'm all set. Right, this is the power of block. I don't have to rewrite any of this at any point in time since I know what the block is, and I can easily put something together very quickly. How do you get the block library to always point to a specific folder? That's a very good question. It is right here. So the next time, if I close my AutoCAD and reopen, it is going to remember the last place I was here, provided that down in the gear wheel, for your profile, which I don't have turned on. Hang on, let me turn on my workspace, which is this workspace, right? The little gear wheel. Come down to workspace settings, and you want to make sure that you automatically save workspace changes. So it will remember this. If you have it to not save, it may not remember the location of anything where you've dragged it, moved it, or may not remember some of these. If this still won't remember where it is, we may need to reset your settings, Kathy, because you may have a problem where this is not being saved to the registry. Right? So this is using the block library. Only the filter. What version of AutoCAD are you using, Kathy? Because you may be missing an update. If you have the block palette and do not have everything for the block library, if you are missing this piece right here, 2022 Civil 3D, you should have this right here. If you don't have this, we may need to repair your Civil 3D. We can talk about that. All right. Now let's talk about some of the other ways we can do things. If we want to get more advanced, right? I'm talking about basics to this point. Now we're going to get into some of the more advanced concepts. So we've got custom programming. So you can create custom commands to insert certain items, must be individual drawings per block. You can create them through the menu bar where you create a custom menu bar item, add a menu item to insert a block, i.e. this is what I put in there, was the minus insert, which is the command line insert. Then I point to the drawing I want to insert. and then I put a semicolon, which says enter. That's going to tell me insert this drawing. This slash represents a pause, i.e. it's waiting for me to click somewhere. And then this is the scale X, Y, and rotation. You can do the same thing with a ribbon. You create a custom ribbon tab. You can add a button to insert a block. It's pretty much the same as below, as above. It's the same command. We just do it a little differently if you're using ribbons. Or you've got a Lisp command. If you're creating a toolbar, i.e., I think it was Ryan, if you have a toolbar, essentially you're creating this exact same line of code and assigning it to a toolbar. So for a Lisp command, you can create commands to insert a block. So for example, this particular Lisp code says if I type in MBX922, it's going to do essentially the same thing where I go minus insert, just like this. We have a space, which is the same as the semicolon. I have a path enclosed in quotes. I have a pause, again, pausing for my input, and then 3 sets of quotes to do the 3 semicolons. And this can also be used in the ribbon or a menu bar. So once you create this custom Lisp, you could then create this command to run. So instead of redoing this, you just put in a command that says, MBX922, and it will run. Okay, so good question, Brian. I have done a bit of VBA with Excel. I know AutoCAD also has VBA, which is a separate download. Can I have a VBA macro as part of the block? So when I insert the block, the VBA macro runs? No. You can have the VBA macro insert the block and then do whatever you need to the block afterwards, but you'd have to all run it via the VBA macro and insert the block using the VBA so you could continue the information or the VBA macro. Is there any training available on AutoCAD VBA? We don't do any. I'm probably one of the few guys left here that actually knows VBA well enough that I can help fix a lot of that stuff, but we generally don't deal a lot with VBA anymore. And the only reason why I say that we don't deal a lot with VBA is that Autodesk has been saying for years that they might eventually no longer support it. They haven't pulled the trigger on that yet, so I either want to keep it in Lisp, which will always be part of AutoCAD, or I want to move that to a .NET environment with a DLL. That would be my recommendation. VBA works really well. The problem is we don't know how much longer it's going to be supported and included. So just heads up on that. So here's the concept. So we're going to talk about this as the concept. So in here, I have a menu element, right? This is a menu bar, and this is going to insert MBX922. And again, I pick my insertion point. All I did was come up here, click that. Same thing in the ribbon. I have Ryan. Here's my panel, insert MBX. I click on the little icon, inserts the same thing. So of course, in order to get to that, we have to go through the QE editor. So first thing I had to do was I had to go in and create. I have to go create a command, right? So I have to come in here and I have to start a new command here. And you'll see that I actually created this in my own separate little menu that I load. So I have a menu, which is Ryan, which is running this command, MBX, right? And this is that same line of code. I have a ribbon with a tab that says Ryan that's running the panel, insert MBX, that on row 1, I'm doing the same thing. So this is how we create custom content and custom ribbons, custom pull-down menus if you prefer the older style of AutoCAD or AutoCAD Classic. So those are all the different ways we can do block libraries and make them more effective, depending on how far you want to take it, right? Custom elements are nice up here. The problem is now you have to support this, right? I will be honest with you, my preferred is Design Center when I'm dealing just with myself, because I can just create drawings, load them up, do things like that. Design Center makes my life very easy. This is my preferred method in a lot of cases, and I'll bury stuff in here. So let's talk about some of the things I alluded to in the very beginning. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to open up a drawing, and in my webinars folder, I have an imperial drawing here with dimensions, right? And then I'm also going to come back and we are going to open up the imperial drawing or the metric drawing with dimensions. Right, so this is if I'm using the same drawing. So this is 254, i.e. 10 inches in metric. This is 10 units or 254 millimeters. What I want to point out to you is that right here, my standard is what I'm calling this. This is standard and I've modified standard. If I come over here, this one is also standard. Well, actually, this one's ISO 25, so this is the wrong drawing. Hang on. Go back and get the correct drawing. This is the one I want. Right, so this dimension style is also named standard. Okay, just to be very clear, both of these are named exactly the same. This is 3 millimeter size text and it is using the standard text style. This is also 1/8 inch height, which is the equivalent at 1.1250. Now, if I insert this block, right, because this is what everyone runs into problems when I insert the block, right? So I'm in my imperial and I import the metric. And you'll see that it knows that I'm bringing in a millimeter units block, and it automatically puts in my scale factor, which is truncated to 3, but it's 0.0393/700/7874, right? And I bring this in, right? So these line up perfectly. Now, of course, what happens is if I explode this, everything goes haywire. Now, if I explode this, what I want you to see is this now inherits this style because they're the same name. This is why it's so important if you're crossing units, if you're building all of your blocks and you go between imperial and metric, keep everything in one, make sure it is all the same name as in the other, and this will be the result. Right, so these dimension styles, when I explode this block, update and match exactly what's here. Now the 3 millimeter size text, this is not going to be exact because this is 3 millimeters. So this is the 3 millimeter equivalent. In order to fix this, I would have to go back to annotative, go back to standard, and now it is the correct 0.1250 text. That's the easiest way to go cross units, or you can accept the fact that that 3 millimeter text is going to be just slightly smaller than 8. So those are all the ways we can do it, right? Obviously, we have our old school method, right? If you do classic insert, right, brings this up, you browse, you go to the directory, right? I can go to the palette drawing. Actually, I can go here, we can insert grinder pump, right? And I can do it this way. But we can do it the old way. How do the blocks behave when you sharing a drawing with another firm that's, say, using MicroStation? MicroStation has something basically similar to block definition. When you're sharing to something like MicroStation, blocks really aren't that big of a deal. It understands that it's a container. That container has geometry in it. When you're sharing out to, if you're getting drawings in from outside and they are not using MicroStation or AutoCAD or an AutoCAD clone like BriskCAD, some of the others, if they're using one of the obscure ones, what is it? It's TurboCAD. There's another one that they use over in Europe quite extensively. How they handle blocks is different. So when you open up their drawing, all of their block definitions are done as groups. and every block has its own name, and their drawings are ginormous, and it requires some effort to clean that up and get that fixed. But for MicroStation, this should work fairly well. Just be wary if you're using annotative blocks or you're using dynamic blocks, that when you bring that stuff into MicroStation, it can be some unintended consequences, but for the most part, it works fairly well. Good question, Brian. All right. I actually made it through early, so we got 20 minutes. Anybody want me to go back over another concept? Anybody want to ask me anything different regarding blocks, block libraries, things like that? We should have had those polling questions about Thursday, Friday, 11 versus noon. Should blocks be exploded in a drawing template? Depends on what you're talking about, Eric. Should blocks be exploded in a drawing template? You can explode them in a drawing template, but understand that even when you explode them, when I go to the purge dialog, that block definition is still here. So remember, I exploded this purple block, which was the metric. It is still here as a block definition. I can still reinsert this as a block until I purge it out. I generally would not recommend exploding stuff in a drawing template unless you also plan on purging it, because that name will continue to live in the block definition. If you're talking about things like title blocks that you need specific information, you can explode that if you want. That would be a bigger discussion we need to have on exactly what it is that you're trying to get to. Pitfalls with cloud drives. Oh, that is a very good one. So, James, that is a very good question. So broad brush, Autodesk does not support cloud technology except for BIM 360 and ACC. You can put block libraries up on BIM 360 or ACC. Honestly, for the most part, you can put them on Google Drive, Dropbox, SharePoint, things like that. There are some pitfalls with some of those, like SharePoint and OneDrive don't have good file locking. So if you are trying to modify a drawing, let's say you're trying to modify a block drawing, and somebody can come in and open that drawing from underneath you, and they can save over your changes. Those are usually the pitfalls. The other pitfall with cloud drives, and this is just more of they're going to be slower than an on-prem server, just because it has to go out to the internet and refresh. If you lose internet connectivity, you're going to lose the ability to get any of those blocks unless you have them cached. As with my other question, the blocks palette also slows down my AutoCAD restart. So that may be depending on where your library is pointing to, Tim. That could be your block MRU, or your most recently used is generally out of the box 50. We may need to set that back to 0 and then see if it's any faster. It could also be a configuration issue. We would probably need to look at that from a more technical standpoint to see. Would you talk about blocks with fields and how to get those fields to update without exploding the block? Ooh, that is a really good question. So blocks with fields and how to get those fields to update. The only way that you get a field to update well or easily is that you have to create an attribute with the field. And then when you run regen all or after you inserted it will update. If you have just a straight field in a block, that field is tied to the block definition, not the drawing it's in. So if you're trying to tie to something like date created, drawing, file name, something like that, that's never going to update without going back and exploding the block. So you might want to try creating an attribute and putting a field in the attribute, and then when you insert it, don't just hit OK at the attribute definition, when it's asking you to edit. Then it should inherit the correct properties. Unless you're pointing to something in the block itself, then it may or may not, depending on what you're trying to point to. It just hit me how to use a combination. All right. It just hit me how to use a combination of toolbars for standard symbols, north, detail bubble, expanding larger discipline-specific libraries and standard detailed libraries in Design Center. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Fran. Steps to make block text searchable in a PDF. Okay, steps to make a block text searchable in a PDF. Okay, so James, we need to talk about what type of text you're using in that block definition. Let's start with that. If you are using SHX text styles, i.e., when I go to my text style editor, like this is a true type, you see TT, this is a true type, this is a true type, this is a true type, this is some garbage text, but this is simplex. Okay, simplex is not normally searchable because simplex is not supported by PDF. Now, depending on how you have this set up, either you will end up with it's PDF SHX. If it's set to 0, it creates no comments. If it's set to 1, it creates comments, and I believe it might be in 24 with fully updated, or it's in 25 where you set PDF SHX to 3. It will leave your SHX text there, and then it will put a mask over top of it that is the same text style, equivalent, and searchable. So depending on what version you're using, James, that's where we would probably need to talk about. So again, if you're using SHX and you're on either 24 that's fully updated, I think they've added it there, but I know for sure it's in 25. Let's go to my favorite. Let's go to our system variables here. Let's go down to PDF SHX. Right, PDF SHX. So when we talk about PDF SHX, sorry, 2, creates a hidden text from text objects that use SHX fonts. Those are searchable. Would a block with fields be dynamic block definition rather than a static block? No, it's still, even in a dynamic block definition, the fields are still going to be the same problem, Brian. Is there an easy way to extract all the blocks in a drawing to a common location? Short answer, no. Long answer is yes, there's an easy way, Dave, but you have to have a Lisp routine to do that. I have a Lisp routine that will basically go into a drawing, we'll grab all the block definitions, write them out as individual blocks to a directory. A building is drawn in Revit, then it is saved to AutoCAD. It's actually exported, but yes. All right. While graphically each door is a 36-inch door, each variation in Revit brings in a separate block. Is there an easy way to change that? With the export settings in Revit, no, there is not an easy way to change that. Going from Revit back to AutoCAD has always been painful. There are some things we can do, but for the most part, those are all going to end up being the same. It's always going to have a different door with a different block name. Has there been any new options added for dynamic blocks? No. That's an easy one. Is there a way to make attributes on blocks that read correctly in different 3D views of the same block? Okay, so Robert, that's where you would probably have to go in and create a dynamic block with different view states, where you either you're turning on attributes depending on the view state. So you've got attributes that are localized to top, side, front, bottom, whatever. And so once you've set the block in and you've set the view state, you could go back in and do that. That would be the only way to do that, because the attributes on the blocks are always localized to essentially the Z of 0 and reading in the XY direction. You can change those attributes to be different, but you'd have to do that in a dynamic block of view states. That's probably the only way you're going to get that to work correctly, or label it after, which obviously you don't want to do. All right. Good questions, guys. I really appreciate this.
So with that, everyone, thanks everyone. Have a great day. And as always, Ryan, thank you so much for your time and effort in this AutoCAD user group. Can't tell you how much we appreciate you. Thank you.